Hello and welcome to Linking Out Loud, the PR podcast. I'm Rachel McHugh and today I am joined by Hollie Hines, who is an organic search consultant and freelancer. And we are going to be talking about something quite digital focused, quite Google focused today, which is EEAT, building trust with users and with Google and demonstrating your expertise. So thank you very much, Hollie, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. It's a pleasure to have you on. Today, we're going to be talking about EEAT, so quite SEO focused, but we'll be looking at how that connects to digital PR, how digital PR can impact that, what PR teams can do to align their strategies to support that. But before we get into the meat of that, it'll be good to have a bit of an introduction to you, what you've been up to, your freelancing, etc. So over to you.
Of course, thank you. I mean, where to begin? I always kind of, some people would have heard me describe myself as that organic search in-betweener, I think, given my experience, because I've come from a financial services background in financial PR, more on the traditional side. But then I kind of shifted more into digital marketing and in organic social, paid social, PR, and then went full kind of SEO, digital PR, and has been a consultant, a copywriter, an SEO strategist. So a kind of the mixed bag across the organic search space.
It's a real sort of well-rounded view of the digital sphere. That's cool. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about EEAT. That's something that you've sort of identified as your area of expertise. So let's start with the basics. For those who might not know anything about that, what does that stand for and what does it mean?
Good question. Before I start to nerd out, because EEAT is my favorite subject, I guess, within organic, it stands for experience, expertise, authority, and trust. It didn't used to be all four letters. It used to just be EAT. And it kind of became, it's always existed, but it became a lot more prominent around 2018 when EAT became featured within the search quality rater guidelines. Some good bedtime reading. I always recommend it for people. I mean, it's 160 odd page document, so get a brew, make some notes. But essentially, EEAT is kind of a guideline that I think, SEOs, digital PRs, everybody should kind of refer to, whether you want to read through that 160 page document. There's some great insights online from loads of different sites that cover it in some more detail. But I kind of use it as the backbone of an organic search strategy.
Nice. And have you read all 160 pages?
Definitely not word by word, but I kind of find myself going back to it year on year. So yeah, I mean, there are smaller guides, but yeah, take your time with it.
For sure. I think there's loads of material out there. So if people are looking to find that, somebody has summarized it for you. So don't worry, because that's a big commitment. I guess the next question is that as somebody who works in digital PR, digital marketing, why does that matter?
I mean, everybody has seen all of the different changes that Google has made to its algorithms. I mean, let alone in the last couple of years, but over many, many years. EEAT is super important because there's a greater focus on helpful content and quality. So while EEAT isn't a ranking factor, it's used as part of those guidelines by quality raters to kind of understand what kind of content is out there, what is deemed quality. And they kind of apply this kind of low and high scoring to sites as they're reviewing them overall. So it's super important to SEOs, digital PRs, anybody in the organic space, because you can essentially use it as a guide to how you should structure your site or what kind of content you should be creating on and off site. Because Google's systems are constantly looking for signals. EEAT is a really good kind of base to kind of get an understanding on what you should be incorporating in your site, because all of that is then considered from the quality raters, and that all feeds into Google's algorithms, to try and summarize that in a nutshell.
Yeah. So it sort of plays into the kind of content that you should be putting on your site, but also elsewhere, so on the rest of the web, which very much ties into what PR would be doing, getting the content that you produce or the comments and quotes, etc., and press releases out into other websites and other publications. So very closely related there, and potentially not something that digital PRs or PRs think about very often. We think about things that are relevant. That's usually important. Sometimes you're just working with what clients want to talk about or what they want to create campaigns on. You might not necessarily think, okay, well, EEAT is quite a big factor here. How could I use that to help inspire my ideas or the kind of things that we're talking about, or how we frame it potentially? Obviously, digital PR plays a big part in general in building authority and trust, which is two of the letters there in the acronym. So do you have any advice for how PRs might be able to shift their strategies to support EEAT principles? Essentially, how can digital PR help build those signals?
Yeah, I think it's, for me, I mean, obviously it's my favorite subject, but I think it's a really exciting time because we've got even more information than we ever had before about creating quality content. And for digital PRs, that strategy, like, it's bringing in all the ammunition that you can possibly have to align with those components of EEAT. With digital PR, the main focus is around authority, but it's really getting to grips with the other components because so much of it across the acronym overlaps with one another. So while trust is super important and digital PRs might kind of, taking DR and DA with a pinch of salt, might use something like that to indicate trust. It's really kind of using your best judgment and looking at EEAT and those principles as part of the strategy. And something that I'm saying to my clients certainly is, doing activity offsite, but getting that on site as well. It's about marrying the two together, and likewise working with SEOs closely as well to get the kind of fundamental best quality of components that you can that tie into EEAT.
So I guess as a PR, it might be worth thinking about, if I'm creating a press release, if I'm creating a campaign, comments, etc., how can I also use that on my site? So it's not just being used for that sort of external link building purpose, but repurposing it so that it is on your own website and showing your own expertise on the website that belongs to your brand, essentially. What's interesting as well is that when you think about in the world of SEO, often when you think about link building and PR, it's just like, get me links. I want follow links, and I want high authority links sort of thing. And it feels quite cut and dried in that way. But when you think about it in terms of EEAT and those sort of other signals and showing that expertise, even though it might not be a direct ranking factor, suddenly digital PR beyond link building becomes a little bit more important. So maybe it doesn't matter that you haven't got the link there, but does it showcase your expertise on this subject? Does it showcase your experience in this area so that your advice is genuinely legitimate and helpful, as you've said? Another thing you mentioned earlier was Google algorithms, updates, etc. Google loves an update. And over time, what we've seen is that first-hand experience and first-hand knowledge is something that's been increasingly emphasized for a long time, but now sort of more than ever, that's really important. How would you say that brands and PR teams can make sure that their content reflects real expertise?
So there's a few things that come into that. I think it's having that multi-channel lens. Google's people first. I think one of the habits that as digital marketers that, whether you're an SEO or digital PR, you can get into is almost working off a checklist, but it's trying to take that objective step back and look at it holistically as well. And that's where then you can kind of get that clearer perspective on brand. And like you say, what tactics you might need to build links as well as that one type of a authority signal. It's funny because I think like in the industry, like we've been doing it for years, like from an SEO point of view, you might talk about it more in terms of case studies. As a digital PR, you might talk about it more as, getting expert as a quote, but it's the kind of longevity that comes with that and demonstrating that type of experience and using the facts to back up both kind of sides of showing EEAT, having the right kind of experts with the time frame of expertise that they can show, but even having that like tangible experience and like proof that they've been there, they've done that, they've tried that. And that's where the kind of multi-channel approach can come in, where you've got the content on your site. You might have, pieces on social media, for example, with those case studies talking about that experience. but you'll also have a quote that could sit off on site and using that off site as well for link building, for example.
Yeah. So with something like this, it's not just one piece of content, it's maybe all the other things around that show that this is a real expert. Because I think in PR especially, there'll be a lot of people claiming to be experts potentially in something that they're not, or being quite loose with the area of expertise that they're in, and covering some of those like shoulder topics that might not necessarily be something they're genuinely an expert about, or even PRs and content copywriters writing comments on behalf of people and then saying it's somebody else, sort of thing. What are your thoughts about how important it is to have a genuine expert? Do you think it's okay to have some, like a PR team, for example, writing comments about things and then seeking sign off from whoever the expert might be? Like, what do you think you can work with or get away with in this case?
It's a great point. Definitely something that clients have asked me about in the past as well. I think especially if you're a site where you're creating lots of content, it's that next step then for sites to think about how to profile their writers. You know, it's inevitable. People change roles as well. Like experts move on. We see it with journalists. It's the same, you know, in-house with a brand as well. My advice is getting the right scale for you. And I talk about it a bit like a paper trail, but online. And making sure that, you know, if you've got that person that's featured, there's that online paper trail of you know, seeing them on LinkedIn or then being featured in other publications. There's that consistency with proof, or essentially trust, that's online and or on site and off site, I should say, to be able to kind of build more of that around the people that you're featuring as experts. And then the kind of golden ticket, I guess, is pairing that with case studies and you know, showing more of that real life experience as well.
Yeah, the real life element's a really good point. Sometimes we'll have clients or an expert even that you're promoting to press and they do share their genuine expertise and it's really relevant, but they might not necessarily have like a bio on the website, or they might not have a big social media presence, or that's something they're working on. So maybe that's something quite important, or maybe that's something we should push for as PRs. Would you recommend something like that, having author bio, not necessarily author bios, but like expert bios, I suppose? What would that look like?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think certainly with like the helpful content guidelines as well, like they talk about content and quality, but expertise sits within those guidelines and proof of that experience and expertise. So yeah, it is a case of like, we talk about like quote banks within digital PR. But you could build those profiles on site. You know, if there's the capacity to do that, it's definitely possible. We're seeing it more with certain, especially more in the kind of niche external sites, like say technology, for example. Writers there have their own tech profile, even linking out to previous sites that they've written for. And again, that's why I talk about building EEAT on and off site at scale, because not everything is feasible for a brand. So if you can have that kind of fully developed author profile, you know, links pointing to previous pieces you've written, then great. But there's other ways about showing EEAT within an author profile as well, like talking about your experience, like making sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date and showing where you've essentially been. There's different ways to scale it.
Yeah, that's a good point, and probably something we could do more of. Even just like including links to previous pieces of coverage or previous pieces of thought leadership. So simple to add, and something we probably work quite hard to achieve in the first place, getting that quote or comment or article featured somewhere, get it on the website and show to other people who are checking you out, this is all the other times that I've shown what I know. So I quite like that. As you were speaking there, it was sort of making me think about AI, of course, had to come up at some point. But I think one of the pet peeves potentially that people are seeing or journalists are seeing is like when people are using AI to generate comments. Obviously, that's so quick to be like, act as an expert in XYZ. Give me a comment on. Although obviously what you're going to get is pretty bottom tier, I'm sure, if that's all you're using. What do you think about that? Or do you think people are going to clock on that it's not going to cut it? Or what do you think?
I think it's hard to comment on, because I think we're way more aware of it and self-informed about how it's used, and even like the quality of the quote or the content that AI would generate. But what I tend to do is a little habit of mine is reading Facebook comments, Instagram comments, and seeing what people's reactions are to news articles. And you can see that the public are changing their perception around news and who's being featured. There's probably people out there that may think, no, that's not new. But when you look into it more, it's really interesting to see what people are reacting to. And a lot of people are challenging, oh, this is an expert. Really? Are they an expert? Or, is this news? And that's why like Google's guidelines and helpful content and EEAT, like that's why I call it like common sense, because where you can, use AI to create that content, it's really, is it people first? Like, is it actually commenting and like contributing to the pain points of somebody within that quote? And that's where AI and the quality may kind of dip a little. So I think as long as the pain points are being addressed, it's fine. And I say fine, like using AI to kind of inspire that and collate some of those kind of pointers of what those pain points are. But you still want that human layer to that point. You still want to make sure that it's aligned, and no computer, no code is going to do that for you.
Yeah, I don't think, or not for a very long time, I don't think will anything like ChatGPT or Gemini be able to like fully grasp what it is that someone as a person who might be reading the news or reading something on a website actually wants to hear. And I hope that now, or I suppose I hope that with there being so much information and we have such easy access to so much information, that we're becoming potentially a bit more skeptical of the people that say they're experts. Maybe not, some people probably aren't. But when there are so many people saying that they know about things, and you start to see more people have just totally different opinions or piece of advice, you start to think, okay, maybe I need to check, are they actually an expert on this? Are they who they claim to be? So potentially as an audience, we're sort of changing in terms of what we expect from the people that are calling themselves experts or telling us what to do essentially in the news. So that could play into it as well.
I think there's something about like, well, not to criticize audience types, I think there's something in that around informed audiences and other types of audiences and different profiles. And again, like the pain points there, like everybody's situation and needs are different. And if you're like, health is always like a great example of how EEAT feeds into that, and your money, your life sites as well. And that alignment there, like you need absolute credibility to be able to talk around those subjects. And that's where you have quotes from people, you have experts. It's really backing up what you're saying, and that's where like EEAT is a great reminder. Like it is common sense, but also it's bearing in mind that there's a lot of information out there. It's our job and our responsibility to not give misinformation and not kind of abuse AI in that respect with a quote or within digital PR or SEO. It's providing people with the facts and making sure that we're not misinforming them and like misguiding people who may not be aware of, say people like us in the industry digesting news all the time and assessing the credibility of those sources as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's very easy to say that we're becoming more tuned into these things, but it's so true. We are maybe hyper aware of things that are happening or like the way that people are consuming media and people's expectations or what journalists think about things, because we look at these things and we talk about these things pretty much every working day, sometimes more. But yeah, potentially like your average Joe might not think these things. So to make sure that there's a responsibility, right? That the content that you're producing and that the information that you're sharing is credible, however you come up with that and however you distribute it. So I definitely agree with that there. And that kind of leads me on to my next question, which is a bit more broadly about some of the other mistakes, or not necessarily mistakes, but traps that people might fall into when they're really trying to implement EEAT principles, or they've decided that's a real focus area for them. What are some of the things that you see people doing maybe to try and fast track that, or that you'd maybe suggest other ways around?
No, it's a great question. I think some of the kind of top level approaches can catch people out. I think like using about pages or like contact information as an example. Yes, you can have an about page. You can talk very top level about a company, but to really demonstrate trust, this is where I talk about the scaling it up, like having more information about the people behind the company, for example. If it is a people facing company and you've got those representatives, and even with the contact, you might have a form, but it's giving more detail about where the business is based, how they can get in contact with you, more information about the customer service team, for example. And I think it's like, obviously in our industry, it's never a case of I kind of say 2+2 doesn't equal 4 within SEO. It's trying to take that holistic approach, but like I said earlier, being objective with it as well, and really looking at it as if you are the customer, which can be really difficult when you're in it, whether you're an SEO or a digital PR or, working across any digital channel. It's trying to take that step back and putting yourself in the customer's shoes. And this is where I kind of try to factor, the more informed audience and the audience that might not be as aware or as brand aware, and they're coming into it new. Crucially, what kind of signals can we add to a site that's really going to help them? And that's where it's really important to bring it back to their pain points as well, and the language that they use, which definitely isn't something that AI does very well all the time.
This is true. I often get outputs and I'm like, no one's ever said that. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, absolutely true. And I think two key summary points, I think, with this whole approach that you can definitely take on, whether you're in PR or SEO or you're just somebody who has a website they're trying to work on, would be the idea of it being helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a simple, sometimes it can seem very complicated, all of these SEO acronyms, of which there are hundreds. But really, if you think about creating something that's very helpful for people, it simplifies it so much because we understand what that means. Like, we've used websites, we've used the internet. And then the other idea is the idea of things being holistic. So don't just tick something off your list and say, okay, I've put this on my website, I've got an about page. How is that reflected on the rest of your website? How is that reflected on social media, like you said? So I think some nice takeaways there that make it seem a little bit potentially less unknown when you break it down like that. So nice. I think to wrap things up then, it'd be quite nice to think about what's coming next. We don't know for sure, but it'll be kind of interesting to hear what you think about potentially the future of EEAT trends, what you think might be coming next, or even just what we should potentially be preparing for as SEO teams or PR teams.
Of course, relevance is the thing that stands out to me. I think there's still a bit of a grey area. I might have peers now being like, what, are you kidding? Like, it's all part of it. But I feel like there's probably going to be another letter added to EEAT at some point, especially with a huge push with helpful content and quality. I think relevance, there still needs to be kind of a stronger focus there. And maybe news sites could take that on board as well. I think, there's a bit of alignment. There's some lessons that news sites, digital PRs are approaching. We can take lessons of each other and how content is created. But yeah, definitely, I mean, like core updates, more of them, bring them on. It's gonna happen. It's inevitable. But yeah, certainly relevance. And I think also that multi-channel view, and almost thinking about things as that content marketer and not just focusing on the data, like the data is there to guide us. It's always there to guide us. Like I said earlier, like taking that step back and trying to see, if you're looking for something, where do you go? Where do you search? And applying that kind of EEAT lens to things with the anticipation that things may change, but really the changes are happening to try and refine that experience. So just being mindful that the more human and people first you can be, I think that will be the next element that comes into play for us.
Yeah, for sure. And as many updates and changes as there will be, they're not trying to catch you out or trick you. If you can create good content, or if you're sort of responsibly creating credible information, sharing that, then you should be in a pretty good position. And I think it's something that within PR we can definitely be tuned into, because the algorithm will always be changing. Like, there will always be something new, I'm sure. So just making sure that we refresh our knowledge of how that works and that sort of thing. Because my background was originally in SEO, like I started in SEO and then I moved to the PR team. So for me, I feel like I learned about SEO, but actually even since then, like 4 years ago now, it's very different, I think. So you can't just learn something and then say, I know it now. You have to be quite tuned into that. And that won't be the case for every PR team generally. Some people aren't as invested in the digital side of things, but in digital PR, they kind of go hand in hand. So got to keep on top of these things.
Absolutely. No, I think that's why I find it quite exciting, because of that alignment with SEOs and digital PRs. Like, not everybody has that skill that the digital PR will have, and not everybody will have the skills that SEOs have. And that's why it's the beauty of bringing those two talents together. And yeah, that extra lens, I think, more of that collaboration between teams, like depending on what your setup is, that's all going to help think more objectively about EEAT and how to demonstrate authority and trust.
Really nice. Well, thanks for sharing all of that with me. I think that's really useful and something that I think a lot of people can learn from. The last thing I like to do before our final segment is ask you if there's any other questions that you wanted to go into a bit more detail on, or any other things that you'd like to share that potentially didn't come up. Anything else that you want to add?
I don't think there is. I know that sounds really boring. I think actually, no, this is where I start to think out loud. Definitely factoring in EEAT and that the bottom line for the client, the brand that you're thinking of, thinking about EEAT as well in terms of touch points and those different conversion points as well, and what that kind of length of conversion time, that's not a phrase, but what that consideration time is, and yeah, just being mindful of how those EEAT elements can come into play, I think, in that. So it's kind of not a specific question, but certainly wanted to add that into the mix of things.
Nice. Your closing statement. Thank you for that. No, thanks for adding that. More information is always helpful.
Nice.
Cool. Then to wrap things up, I like to ask my guests a series of this or that questions in what's typically digital PR, this or that. But I think today it's maybe a bit more SEO focused or a bit more general. So the way it works is I'll give you two options and just tell me which one you would go with. Gut instinct, you don't have to explain it. Usually people do anyway, but this is this or that. So the first one is SEO or digital PR?
Oh, everyone's an SEO, so I'm going to say
Moz or Ahrefs?
Ahrefs.
Claude, Gemini, or ChatGPT?
ChatGPT, just because I've used that one more.
The classic. Featured snippet or position one?
Oh, featured snippet. I got to think of search generated stuff, so yeah.
Evergreen content or trending content?
I always loved reactive and digital PR, so let's go for trending.
Nice. And then LinkedIn or Twitter/X?
Definitely LinkedIn.
Fair enough. I still can't bring myself just to call it X. I still feel like I always have to say
I
Twitter
agree
as well.
It's like the epitome of not to name a brand, isn't it? Because people are still referring to the old name.
Yeah. I even saw an article this week saying X, formerly known as Twitter. Like, imagine doing a whole rebrand and then every time you got mentioned, it would put in brackets your old name. So yeah. I just find that quite funny. But yes, LinkedIn for the win. Well, thanks very much, Hollie, for joining me. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us PRs about the world of SEO and EEAT. I think there's something we can all take away from that. So I really appreciate that. As always, all of the information will be linked in the description, where you'll be able to find Hollie's LinkedIn profile, so do check her out. Don't forget to follow the podcast on Spotify and leave us a review if you enjoyed. And you'll be able to find myself and Distinctly on LinkedIn as well. Do give us a follow because we'll have updates about upcoming episodes and other activity as well. So stay tuned.